Hello and welcome to Maximum Disc, a show where I celebrate physical media and talk about films that I own on Blu Ray and 4K Blu Ray. I'm James Adamson. I'm a co-host on the Double Reel Film Podcast. If you like this chat about physical media, please do check out Double Reel. It's a magazine-style podcast made by people who love movies as much as you do. We cover lots of different films and topics, and we think if you tune into any episode, you'll come away with a bunch of great recommendations of things to watch instead of just doing what the algorithm tells you. That's enough sales pitch for the podcast. We're here to talk about physical media today because I think it's important. And I think if you've clicked on this YouTube video, you think so too. If you care about a film, you need to own it. You need to own it in a physical copy because you can't rely on the streamers to make everything available. You can't necessarily rely on them to make it available in the right version. And we'll talk about that for this episode, particularly today. And it's not going to look and sound the way it really should or at its best on a compressed file down the internet. So this is about the proper way to watch a film, and that's going to sound a little bit snooty, but hey, let's be snooty about great films on the right format to watch them. Each episode I talk about one film that I own. I talk about what the disc is, what it contains, whether it's got any nice special features. We talk about the sound and vision because that's what people are really interested in. How does it look and sound? Is it a good reproduction of the original film? I also talk about my history with the film, how I relate to it, why I came to love it enough to own it and all of those things. And at the end, I'll give you my thoughts on whether it's an essential purchase, help you make your own mind up about whether you want to buy it. Today I'm going to be discussing Federico Fellini's Amarcord, a classic Italian film from the 1970s, which I own on Blu Ray. This is a film that he released in 1973. Federico Fellini is a legendary Italian filmmaker, and this film is inspired by events from his own childhood and adolescence, growing up in a small Italian town during Mussolini's fascist rule. The Italian writer and poet Tonino Guerra is also credited on the screenplay. It's got a cast of Italian actors that I only really know from this film because I've got, I guess, relatively limited knowledge of Italian cinema generally. Bruno Zannin plays Tito, the central character, a teenage boy through whose eyes the audience sees most of the story. The character is based on one of Fellini's childhood friends, but Fellini's own personal experiences are blended in with this as well. Other notable actors in the film are Magali Noel, Armando Branchia, Ciccio Ingrassia, and Maria Antonietti Belluzzi. I hope I've done a reasonable job pronouncing those. Cinematography is by Giuseppe Rotunno, a major Fellini collaborator who was director of photography on 8 of his films. He also worked with other major Italian directors like Visconti and on English language films with the likes of Terry Gilliam and Bob Fosse. Only 2 people are credited for sound on IMDb, Oscar De Angelis and Renato Marinelli. Other people may well have worked on it, but that's all we get. Sometimes that's the case on these older films on the IMDb credits. On the subject of sound, we should obviously mention the score, which is by the late, great Nino Rota, another Fellini stalwart who scored many of his films and also worked with other key Italian directors, such as Visconti again, and perhaps most famously worked with Coppola and did the scores for Godfather and Godfather Part 2. Fun fact, he initially won the Oscar for Best Score for the first Godfather film, or was nominated for it, but was disqualified because part of one of its pieces of music contained material used for a different film. They can be very fussy about that at the Academy. Justice was done or restored when he won again for Godfather 2 and held on to it this time. Speaking of awards and nominations, this was a highly garlanded film when it came out. The big one is it won Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars, as well as nominations for Best Director and Screenplay. That was less common than it is now, so this was a big thing for it to get recognition at the Oscars in the way that it did. It was extremely well received and nominated and won awards across a range of critic societies, especially across Europe. National film awards, festivals, critic societies, all that sort of thing. And as you can imagine, it got an absolute ton of awards and nominations in Fellini's native Italy, such as the David Donatello Awards, the Italian Golden Globes, which are a thing apparently, and the Nastri d'Argento Awards, where it got 4 wins from 9 nominations. Lots of love for Fellini's direction and the screenplay. The cinematography, sound and score was somewhat overlooked, though, with only a couple of nominations here and there. In terms of what the film is about, I kind of mentioned at the start, it's a semi-autobiographical account of growing up in fascist-era Italy. The title Amarcord is a contraction of an Italian Romagnol, I think, dialect phrase meaning I remember, which has a couple of different, double meanings and a touch of irony, because as well as talking about memory of the past, it also sounds like the word for bitterness. So it's not just a nostalgia fest. We're talking about one of the great directors here, Fellini, so there's always a few different things going on in even the title of the movie. The word has now passed into common usage in the Italian language to mean recollections of the past and childhood and so on. It focuses in particular on the main character, Tita, and his teenage school friends growing up in a surreal environment, actually, in which their families, the church, and the fascist regime combine to keep them in a state of perpetual, adolescent hysteria. And in its own surreal and sometimes grotesque way, it's a commentary on Mussolini's Italy and Catholicism and the 1930s, I guess, contrasting their supposed ideals of traditional values and fascist strength with this town full of crazed eccentrics. The characters are sort of a gallery of kind of odd, sometimes archetypes, sometimes stereotypes, I don't know, that he's playing on. And the score from Rotor is lush and nostalgic, which is often a counterpoint to what you see on the screen. It's vivid, strange, sometimes hilarious, very pointed in its satire of Mussolini's fascists. At times it's glamorous and beautiful, and other times grimy, and others just, downright weird. So my background with the film is, like I say, I don't have an extensive knowledge of Italian film. I'm interested in it. There's quite a few great Italian films that I love. I obviously knew Fellini was a massive name. I think I saw Cinema Paradiso, which isn't a Fellini film, but I think it's similar to this because it talks about growing up in a nostalgic sort of coming-of-age tale, but much more straightforwardly nostalgic in this case. And I think it's influenced in a sense by Fellini, in the sense that it's got a main character as a stand-in to one extent or another for the director of the movie. So I was interested in that kind of Italian film where you see a small Italian town growing up. And then I saw a picture of the original poster for Amarcord by Fellini and saw a basic summary of what it was about, and I was drawn to that story. Okay, this is going to be a different take on that kind of view of growing up in a small Italian town. So I watched it and loved it. It very quickly became my favourite Fellini film, and one of my favourite films of all time, actually. I know the cineasts' favourites among Fellini's films tend to be La Strada, La Dolce Vita, and 8.5. And maybe if you're more knowledgeable about film than I am, those are better. I don't know. I just fell in love with this gaudy, strange, outrageous portrait of what a bizarre environment this was to grow up in. Fellini hires actors and non-actors based on how much character they got in their face. So you got some really odd-looking people, but it's glorious to watch. You get these amazing scenes. There's a scene where an ocean liner goes past and they all row out on their boats to see it and get capsized by the wake of the ship. The racing cars go by. I think it's the Mille Miglia race so they all come out to watch the racing cars go by their town. You got young sort of teenage boys' fantasies of glory and sexual conquest contrasted with their own kind of, ridiculous kind of, teenage lives, and all these eccentric characters in the town. And at the same time, the fascist regime is never far away, and Fellini's brilliance is in lampooning those fascists without making them at all sympathetic when they make you laugh. It's kind of got this atmosphere where all of the characters are in this kind of state of what's the word? It's stunted growth, or their development's been held up because this repressive regime supported by the Catholics doesn't allow them to kind of grow or develop into their own people, so they stay in this kind of hysterical, almost oversexed, kind of ridiculous kind of state of being. And it's a really interesting and really kind of fun poking way to kind of hold up what fascism does to people. It's beautifully done. So let's talk about the disc. And I'm going to compare this at times to the digital copy I previously bought on Amazon, because it was really hard to get any kind of physical media of this film. And Amazon had a digital copy, which I bought, and that version is a fucking travesty. Let's just be honest, right? It's only got dubbed English audio. It's got no subtitles. It's a not very good dub. It doesn't really pay proper attention to what they've got there. They've just thrown it out. It's absolutely not good enough. It's not how an all-time classic film should be treated, and just shows that the way to watch this film that actually respects the material is on physical media. And it took me some time to find a copy on Blu-ray that wasn't, secondhand or ridiculously expensive and available and would play on a Region B player. There's no 4K disc, so I was looking in the Blu-ray market, and I finally found, at a reasonable price on eBay, a version of this film that was released in Spain and had the original Italian audio and English subtitles, so I would be able to watch the movie. It's got very little in the way of special features. Like I say, I had to buy it on eBay. Apparently there is a Criterion disc of this film, but it's only available from the US, and it seems very little chance at the moment of it getting upgraded to 4K. Fingers crossed that might happen in the future. But what I have here is kind of a local, regional Spanish copy of the Blu-ray. It does have the nice original kind of cover or poster for the front, but it's a fairly basic package. The video quality, the video quality is gorgeous. How much of that is because of the quality of the Blu-ray transfer? Well, I've read up and I can't find anything definitive, but I think this is the same transfer that you would get in that fancy Criterion edition. This original film was shot in 35mm on Eastman film stock, which is good quality, film from the old school. And the negative had a restoration done at some time in the past to preserve the quality. And then they did a really nice, Blu-ray transfer in HD of this film. So it looks very good in that it's a perfectly solid reproduction of the original film. They haven't gone overboard. It's not, I don't think they've done a full 4K remaster print to then do Blu-rays from, but it's a good solid reproduction of the original. The grain is just right. It's all very solid. But obviously more of the credit, I think, goes to the fact that the film is beautiful to begin with and the Blu-ray doesn't screw it up. So you get all, the Italian countryside, in the sunshine and the night, and you get old buildings and the period setting. You get beautiful shot scenes of dancing in a ballroom, which is really colourful and glamorous and wildly stylish. The ship in the fog looks amazing. As well as that, you get these overly rich and gaudy colours because of that surreal and sometimes grotesque look that Fellini is going for. And all of that is very well preserved in this. It looks the way it should look. Because Fellini was a master and the visuals are terrific in the film. I'm not trying to sound like unenthusiastic. It's just that I feel like they've just done a solid job with this Blu-ray of a film that was already very good looking. I don't mean to criticise the job that anyone did. They all did a good job of the video. The audio is similar. It's absolutely fine. Nino Rota's score is, lush and nostalgic. It's a mixture of 30s period music, traditional Italian melodies, as well as Rota's classic film score style, which you'd know if you've seen The Godfather. It sounds great here. It's pin sharp. Everything comes across well in terms of dialogue and sound and everything. It hasn't been given a 5:1 mix or Atmos or anything. It's standard stereo, which I believe is the same as the original theatrical audio that the film came with. And, a lot of people think it's a good thing to stick with the original mix of the film, the theatrical mix, as it were. I do see discs come out nowadays that give you your new 5:1 or your Dolby Atmos, but says, by the way, here's the even mono or stereo theatrical audio that you originally had, because that's usually pretty good as well. And this is very good as well. All the dialogue and all the sound. You have a bonfire, you have people running through the street, you have all sorts of shenanigans and fun and games going on in the movie, and it all sounds good. And again, I don't mean to sound unenthusiastic like I did for the video. It's just, actually, it's not the kind of film that has particularly mind-blowing audio moments. There's no helicopters, there's no explosions, no one goes to space in a rocket. So they haven't gone for a major sound remaster or anything. It's just a very good reproduction of the original film sound. And especially the score. The score is beautiful. You could listen to that music on its own. It's absolutely lovely. So in terms of sound as well as vision, this film looks and sounds, I think, every bit as good as Nino Rota's score was meant to sound, and the way Fellini meant to make the film look and sound when he directed it in the first place. So overall, this is one of my all-time favourite films. It perfectly captures that idea of, on the one hand, a wonderful little Italian town that if I were going through there now on a holiday, I'd love to stop for a coffee and kind of see all the characters who live there. They probably might not be as wild as they're portrayed in this film. There's a lovingly recreated period setting. All of those things look great. There's a lovely scene of the sunset when they're trying to get their uncle, who's escaped from the mental home out of the tree. It's a mad knockabout scene. Beautiful sunset in the background while you're watching it. All looks great. It's lovely. You focus on the absurdity of it and the weirdness of fascism being part of your everyday life. It is surreal at times. There are dream sequences and all of these things. And it's an absolute work of genius by one of the greatest Italian directors of all time. Absolutely marvellous. It's magnificent. Now, I'm probably in the minority thinking this was Fellini's all-time career peak, but I just think it is. It's beautiful because it sucks you in thinking, oh, look at this great, nostalgic picture of growing up in an Italian town. I watched Cinema Paradiso by a different director. I love that. I mean, I love the idea of, turning on a film and seeing this, beautiful Italian town from the 1930s. And then you get this strange, weird world in which the church and the fascist regime are, wrapped around these people and make, people struggle in that environment. But at all times, never depressing, never downbeat. It's because these are kids growing up they happen to be growing up in a weird and strange world, but they're kids and they have that verve and lust for life at the same time. So absolutely wonderful stuff. Like I said, it's a decent reproduction of it. Is it an essential purchase? If I was to put this in the shortest possible terms, I'd say essential, yes. Definitive, no. This film looks great and sounds great because the film always did, and it's a perfectly solid disc version of the film. I love this film. It's an absolutely beloved film that obviously I would want to own. At the same time, though, I'd love to see a proper UK or Region B Criterion release. I'd love them to have a little leaflet with an essay by a great writer about it and some extra special features about this, a full-on remaster. Because even Blu-rays these days, they do a 4K transfer of the original negative to get an absolutely perfect image and all the sound absolutely right. And even on Blu Ray, they're giving you a terrific image when they do that. I'd love to see that given the absolute full treatment. And obviously, if they did a 4K, I'd be all over that like a shot. However, especially as evidenced by the absolutely disgraceful digital version Amazon is making available, this is the only way to see this film properly, is to own it on disc. And this is a very good version. It's, the blurb on the back of the case is in the Spanish language, which I understand like about 1 word in 3, but I get it, and I put on the Blu-ray and I get the movie, the proper movie, with the actors speaking in their own voices and the sound and vision being absolutely right, instead of some shonky digital file that Amazon have put absolutely no love into. So it's a no-brainer for me to own my own copy of one of my favourite all-time films. You might not have watched any Fellini, or if you have, you might be one of those better informed, movie fans who believe that 8.5 or La Dolce Vita is his peak, and you don't think this is good. I think this is a great film. I think you should probably maybe watch it, make your own mind up. But I think this is worth watching for anyone, because this is actually an all-time great film by one of the all-time great filmmakers. So it makes complete sense for me for this to be an essential purchase for me, and I'd like to think for a lot of people out there it would be an essential purchase for you too. So that's what I think of Fellini's Amarcord. I mean, it's been more about the film today and the fact that you need to own it on disc rather than a particularly kind of in-depth discussion of like a great disc version. I think that great disc version, certainly for my region anyway, is yet to arrive. But this is a really good Blu-ray that I think you should buy, and hopefully that was a helpful review of it for you thinking of buying it. So thanks for joining me. Once again, if you enjoyed the show, please do check out Double Reel, and ways to find the podcast on our socials will be on the screen in a moment. And I hope to see you next time for more physical media chat right here on Maximum Disc. The Maximum Disc YouTube channel is brought to you by Double Reel, the monthly magazine podcast for the discerning film nerd. If you like our celebration of physical media, please check out the podcast for more chat about the films we love and hate.